The net neutrality feud between Republican Senator Ted Cruz and Democratic Senator Al Franken continues. Now, if you haven't been following this all along, it started off when Barack Obama made clear to Tom Wheeler, one of the chairmen of the FCC, that he should do what's right vis-a-vis the American people when it comes to net neutrality, and Senator Ted Cruz was not having it, and so he tweeted this. So he said, net neutrality is Obamacare for the internet. Obviously, it must be the worst thing ever then. The internet should not operate at the speed of government. Ted Cruz is a guy who definitely thinks he's smarter than everyone else in the room. Now he seems to think he's more clever than anyone else on Twitter. But he made clear in remarks after that tweet that he does not actually understand even the basics of what net neutrality is and the problems that it's trying to solve. That led Al Franken to respond, and we have a couple little video clips. Here's the first.
And let me tell you why this is a terrible, terrible, terrible idea to have a fast lane. I'll give you an example with YouTube. Before YouTube, there was this thing called Google Video that Google had, and it wasn't very good. The guys who started YouTube were three guys over a pizzeria in San Mateo, California. It created a superior product, YouTube, and it traveled at the same speed as Google Video, and people liked YouTube better. So YouTube won because it was better. And a few years later, Google bought YouTube for $1.65 billion. Okay, so this was three guys above a pizzeria. Facebook was started in a dorm room at a college. That's the innovation that we have seen on the internet since the very beginning. It's always been, net neutrality has always been there.
So there's the contrast, really. It's Ted Cruz incorrectly stating that net neutrality is basically putting new layers of regulation that would stop innovation when it comes to the internet, connectivity, and things like that. And then Al Franken showing that, no, we've had decades and decades of innovation under the previous system before we started fiddling with it, and that was a neutral system when it comes to internet access.
Now, I haven't been shy about calling Republicans stupid on the show before, right? I don't think that's the case here. I mean, Ted Cruz is a really annoying guy, incredibly smug, wrong just an overwhelming majority of the time. But I don't think he's a dummy. And I think he knows exactly what net neutrality is about. And that's why I actually think he's more nefarious than people realize. So here's a guy who, I mean, really, you don't understand the concept of the internet. You think it's like Ted Stevens said, a series of tubes, and you don't know where they go. Or as Rick Perry said, where the tweeter takes your tweets, okay? No, Ted Cruz knows. And he knows that he's doing the bidding of his donors. And in fact, he has gotten a tremendous amount of donations for the same telecom companies that want to slow down the internet for the rest of us and hold us hostage, basically, as they demand ransom for different websites.
More than likely more and more ransom over time.
Right, and Ted Cruz has to be aware that this is, if he had it his way, the internet would change, okay? And Al Franken is arguing for it to remain the same internet that we all cherish at this moment. And he's setting out to deceive his own followers. So it's Sarah Palin-esque in that sense. He's a lot smarter than Sarah Palin, but Sarah Palin, the one thing she's good at is tricking her own followers to make a buck. Like, so she'll raise all this money for Sarah PAC, and then she'll spend 4% of it on the Republican politicians she was supposed to help, and spend a majority of the money on hotels for herself,
pantsuits,
books, her own books that then goes into her pocket, right? And so
it's ironic since she doesn't read.
Exactly. And in this case, Ted Cruz is trying to trick conservatives and libertarians into destroying the internet. Because that's what his donors want.
And that's not even theoretical. I was looking at a couple of conservative sites talking about this feud, and they would play, a speech of Ted Cruz or whatever, explaining his understanding of net neutrality, and then you go into the comments, and it's all conservatives, and they're saying, "Yeah, Ted, stand up for the internet. Don't let them get their hands on it." They're idiots. They have no idea what's going to happen because they're directly fighting. All Al Franken wants to do is get us back to more than a year ago, before the ISPs ransomed Netflix to pay more money. Like, we no longer really have a totally neutral system, but we did up until recently, and they have no clue who is fighting for them and who is fighting against them. And I'm glad that you brought up the smugness. In the second clip, you're going to see Ted Cruz. Oh, it's actually, let's jump ahead to 5. This is going to be Ted Cruz explaining what net neutrality is to him. He's going to do another little analogy about innovation, and he's going to be incredibly smug during it.
This is about reclassifying something so it stays the same. This would keep things exactly the same that they've been.
What happens when government starts regulating a service as a public utility? It calcifies everything. It freezes it in place. Let's give a simple contrast. The Telecommunications Act of 1934 was adopted to regulate these, to put regulations in place, and what happened? It froze everything in place. This is regulated by Title II. This is not. Your smartphone, the internet, the apps, all of this is outside of Title II. The innovation is happening without having to go to government regulators and say, "Mother, may I?" We want a whole lot more of this and a whole lot less of this.
The only thing accurate about that clip is the darkness in which it is imbued. Like, he looks like a villain out of a movie in this dark set with, like, almost fascist colors behind him and imagery. And
Minions.
And no disrespect to whatever format that was. It just looked bad, right?
Yeah.
So now, okay, let's break down the nonsense. First of all, he's saying the telephones are a public utility, and now if you reclassify the internet as a public utility, then the government would regulate it more. That is not true. The intent of putting it as a public utility is not to regulate it more. No one has ever suggested that. The intent of that is to be able to classify it in a category where it will be left alone, just as it is right now. And the reason for that is because of Supreme Court decisions that say, all right, you can stop the companies from doing slow lanes and fast lanes and slowing down the internet for everybody who doesn't pay the ransom. If it is characterized as a public utility, you cannot do it otherwise. So it's responding to Supreme Court decisions. Again, Ted Cruz is a lawyer. It's not like he doesn't know that. He does know that.
It's hard to know.
And he's being disingenuous here to suggest to people, and think about one more layer of this. Oh, it'll be like the old telephones. Oh, that sucks. And the smartphones are great, etc. They have to pretend that they're in favor of keeping the internet as it is, even though that is the exact opposite of their position, in order to try to convince people. So that means they already know that they're on the wrong side. If they were on the right side, they would say, let's change the internet, right? Because that's what they actually want to do. Let's change the internet to allow the companies to decide which websites are fast and which ones are slow, and be able to slow down 90% of your internet if you want. Let's allow the companies to make political decisions. Let's allow companies to have monopolies. If they thought they had the winning argument, they'd just be honest about it. They know they have the losing argument. That's why they have to pretend to actually be on our side while doing the opposite.
And they have to rely on the people listening to that speech and the people who are going to continue to vote for them to not have any idea what the issue is or who's on which side of it. And like funny, they bring up the Gruber thing over and over, a joke made about the stupidity of the voters in regard to Obamacare. But then they run entire campaigns based on, they're not going to fact check anything. And you might be right about whether or not he's nefarious or stupid. I'm not sure. But when I see him hold up a phone and say, the iPhone's only possible because they don't have to go to government regulators and say, "Mother, may I?" You idiot. The iPhone in specific, Apple, and cell phone services and the products, there's dozens and dozens of regulations on every single layer of that. The idea that Apple has no government regulations on it, and that they're for no government interference, when this is a guy who almost certainly thinks that we should maintain the current level of subsidies that we have for fossil fuels, stopping innovation that would lead to futuristic clean technologies like solar and wind power and things like that, which find it harder to compete because we artificially keep the price of fossil fuel driven energy down. They're supposed to philosophically and ideologically have a position when it comes to the economy that they want it to be free and they want it to be open, but they have on every issue, on every particular issue with each particular company, they basically roll the dice on whether or not they're getting paid enough to switch their position, and then they go and lie about their position. How is a regular person who doesn't follow it all day long supposed to know who to vote for?
Of course. And so I like that there's a healthy debate on the Young Turks as to whether Ted Cruz is evil or stupid. Okay, perhaps the answer is C. Both. Okay. Now, one more thing about this. There is such a thing as facts and truth. And So nobody has a monopoly on the truth. And now, if you are an outside observer and you don't know who's right about this, you say, well, look, the Young Turks claim very vehemently that this is the case. Ted Cruz claims the opposite. You can investigate it, and you can actually find out that there is a real truth to it. Don't just rely on us. Certainly don't just rely on Ted Cruz. Look into it. And I think that where the rubber hits the road here and where Republican politicians might eventually have problems is that conservatives also have websites.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's true.
And so at some point, some conservative websites might be like, wait, do I really want Comcast and Verizon to be able to decide to pick a political enemies list and slow down their websites? If you're a conservative, look, don't be so smug like Ted Cruz and think that the corporations are always going to be on your side. Believe me, if it's to their advantage at all, they will crush you like they would crush anything else. It's logical, and if you oppose them politically, which has happened quite often, you think they won't slow down your website? So look into it, know what the reality is.
Yeah, I hope so. But when I see Alex Jones, the most prominent, I guess, conservative on YouTube, who's against net neutrality, you see Glenn Beck against net neutrality, has his own internet thing. I don't know. I honestly don't know where they're going to come out. And I mean, when it comes to like things like Netflix, until I guess like the Country Music Awards are on there, they don't seem to care about access to that. It seems like mostly a lib thing in general. But
No.
Anyway.
And look, and Alex Jones and Glenn Beck, if they can be classified at all, are more libertarian than conservative. But to me, that's even more ironic because it's the exact opposite of the libertarian philosophy. Libertarian philosophy is let the market sort it out. So if everybody's on an equal footing, as Al Franken pointed out, a couple of guys in a garage can beat mighty Google and then eventually get $1.6 billion out of them, right? So, but if you change the internet, then the corporations will get to have basically monopoly or oligopoly power where you will not have a free marketplace. You will have a marketplace dominated by them for their own profit and for their own economic and political interests. As a libertarian, you should hate that.